Get started, and folks are going to join us as they do. Want to say good afternoon to everyone. I'm Joe Campolo, and along with my co-host Peter Klein, we want to welcome you to Business Unusual. We call it Business Unusual because nothing is usual about what's going on today in the economy. What we've done since COVID hit and sort of decimated the economy. What we've done every week is tried to have a conversation from a macro level to look at economic indicators and what's going on in the world, and then bring it back home here to Long Island to critical industries with leaders in those industries that can talk about how COVID has impacted their industry, what they're seeing, how they're using technology and other maneuvers to try and keep things moving forward. Today, we're very, very happy to have John Corrado, president of Suffolk Transportation, with us. John's been a friend for a long time, and he's really one of the most innovative thinkers and operators in the transportation system. But before we get to John, Peter, every week I'm sort of scratching my head, thinking we're going to have a different conversation about the marketplace. And I want to just go through a couple of things with you that were in the Wall Street Journal today. Okay, so first of all, it's very clear that the Federal Reserve and Secretary of the Treasury all agree that we had a huge contraction, and the first part of recovery from that huge economic contraction is going to be bringing about the jobs that we have, right?
Right.
What we're seeing now that many states, including us, are in phase 3, is that only 5% of the people who were laid off were brought back, okay? Even with all the PPP dollars and all that other jazz, only 5% have been brought back. And
they were paid. They were paid, but they weren't working.
Well, they were brought back, either laid off and PPP was used to bring them back, but 5% is not the bounce that we were looking for at all in terms of reemployment. We're still hovering at the 20.5 million people totally unemployed, right? And another amazing statistic is that the employment to population ratio, the amount of people who could be gainfully employed in the United States, half of them right now, 47.2, are unemployed. So looking at that and understanding that job growth is the number one economic indicator that we can be looking at, right? We would expect the market to be in the toilet right now. Yet right now the market is going to close, and at the end of today, where we end Q2, it's going to be the strongest growth of the market since 1998. So here we're in a pandemic, okay, and it hit right at the end of Q1, and the growth we've had in Q2 has been the strongest since 1998. And I say, how the hell does that happen, right? And I want to add one more tidbit to that, because American economics never ceases to amaze me. Another report that came out said consumer spending is way up, record numbers of consumer spending. Yeah. So half people don't have jobs, the market's up, and they're spending more money than ever. So please help me understand this insanity.
Well, I wish I could. I wish I had the right all the answers, but let me try to help you with a couple. Obviously, the second quarter was very strong on the S&P 500. Remember, the S&P 500, folks, is a capital weighted index, capitalization weighted. So the biggest companies, there are 5 of them, and you know the ones, are having an outsized impact on the S&P. In fact, the number of the equally weighted, if you were to equally weight all 500 companies, 1/500th each, it's a much different story. So that's the first thing, because the S&P is probably not a great metric when you're looking at, the economy, right? Because of the fact that it's heavy tech, heavy 5 or 6 companies are really controlling it. And those companies are knowledge-based companies, not really employee-centric companies. And frankly, all those employees are probably still working because they're all remote. So a little bit of a different kind of apples to oranges thing. The other thing, though, is, as you said, Joe, we were down at the bottom on April 1st. So the snapback, while momentous, historic head scratching is also a consequence of being down so sharply in March, and that, and sort of that jump up from there. So we'll have more information to share on Thursday when we find out the unemployment news for June, and it will likely be market moving. We had one in the prior month's employment news, as you may remember. It still showed about 14 million people out of work, but it was a couple million less than they expected. So we will see how that statistic works out on Thursday. They usually report it on Friday, but because Friday's a market holiday, they're reporting it on Thursday. Employment's an important piece of the puzzle. There's no doubt about it. But the consumer spending thing you mentioned it's really a head scratcher. And I would tend to think a lot of that is pent up demand, pent up spending. I really can't figure it out. I just think Americans like to spend, and it's important for them to do so in a normal economy, probably less important in a stressful economy.
Yeah, so the article I read, which was interesting, said that the biggest growth in spending were durable goods, which are things that are set to last more than 3 years, right? And the thesis was people are spending so much time in their house that they're saying, I need a new refrigerator, I need a new couch, I need this. And you get all of these. I mean, Home Depot's, perfectly famous for doing it. 24 months, no interest.
Right.
People say, screw it. I'm going to order, I'm bored. I'm going out of my mind. I'm not going to pay interest for 24 months. So I'm going to go ahead and buy the new kitchen
That's
cabinets and the new refrigerator. So, just the last point on that too, that I think people need to understand is all of this also comes on the Fed. And I think it's $500 billion, $500 billion. Yes. $500 billion that they're lending businesses through corporate bonds, which is also an amazing thing. Because
wow, that's crossing the Rubicon in my book. I mean, now you're talking about the Federal Reserve Bank, the Bank of the United States, so to speak. Our Reserve Bank, is actually, our central bank is actually buying corporate bonds. I mean, what's next? Stocks? I mean, so that's really a moral hazard that really concerns me.
yeah. So what is your take, Peter? Give us your take, right? Every week
Okay,
I ask, and
happy to do so. I have a couple of slides. Can we get those shown to the public?
yeah, Jen, if you could pop the Peter presentation up.
There you go. Oh, thanks, Jen. Okay, so I think that the market is expecting 3 V's. And if you advance to the next slide, please. Oh, can I do that? Okay, great. So I think they are expecting these 3 V's. The 3 V's are vaccine, a V-shaped economic recovery, and a victory for Trump by the end of the year. And I don't know if that makes, I think it's becoming increasingly unlikely, all 3. And I think that the market's not expecting that.
The only one, Peter, I'll tell you, the only one that seems, right, to be gaining traction is the vaccine. A V-shaped recovery, particularly with the stagnation and unemployment, right? And look, I mean, this market clearly has a Trump victory baked into it, but
I'm not so sure.
There's no indications that that's going to occur right now. He seems to be going backwards.
Agreed.
Why isn't it adjusting?
I don't know. I think it's markets will go to extremes, Joseph. They will go to extremes on the downside, and they will go to extremes on the upside. Our job as investors is to sort of slice and get the middle. And that's sort of why I suggest folks be, increasingly careful in this current environment. The other point I want to make here is with government debt, and that was the correct shock absorber given what we were facing, a global pandemic. Clearly the right prescription. I'm worried about the aftertaste, the higher marginal taxes that are going to be required for years to come to finance the surge, these trillions of dollars of spending over a short period. So that's a concern I have. And the next slide, we could get into some. So now we're saying earnings. We talked about earnings are the most important part of a stock price. And yet, as you can see from this particular slide, there's a big disconnect between the profit margins and the expectation of those profit margins and the market, the S&P 500. And as you can see, in previous areas, you've seen in previous, market tops, of course, they were presaged by having a reduction in profit margins. So that would go to suggest that the S&P is sort of just on its own world right here. They're not following the glide path. They're not following the playbook. If profit margins are expected to come down, it means your earnings are expected to come down. In fact, most strategists on Wall Street expect a substantial contraction in earnings. So what's going on here? And I think a lot of it is the stimulus that's been sloshing around. And I think it's a little bit of a bubble. If you go to the next slide, please. And bubbles are serious. And this is a little diagram, a little fun cartoon that sees, how bubbles are getting pumped up. And be careful about bubbles, folks. The next slide will show you, unless you've forgotten, bubbles can be kind of dangerous. This is the last two, right? Or maybe there's a couple more in there too, but tech bubble of the early aughts, as you see there, 10 years later, those four horsemen of the tech bubble were still down. So if you were a guy who bought, Cisco and Intel and other stocks back in the tech bubble, 1996, 97, and you went to sleep for 10 years, 12 years, you were still down. Big. Same thing with the Nifty 50 in the 1960s, 70s. So I worry about this sort of, all the Fed's accommodations may have undue consequences for investors. So my message is to be cautious out there and be careful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's so crazy to pump trillions of dollars into the economy the way that they have. We just don't know where that's going to, to lead. So we'll keep our eye on this, folks. And every week, Peter's going to have some updates based on whatever market moving indicators have come out and reported. It's really a crazy time, really crazy time. So now I want to turn to our guest, John. John's the man behind the curtain there. Look at him. He's all good. And so, John, very difficult time for your industry. So talk us through a little bit. So March comes, and what was that like? What was going on? What were you going through? And how have you sort of managed through this process to this point?
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for inviting me. Hello to everyone, Peter. Yeah, obviously difficult time for everyone, very difficult for us. Our perspective, about a third of our business is public transit and 2/3 of it is school bus. So March 13th comes and we shut our businesses down, schools close, and we start considering laying some people off. With all this, and I guess for other folks involved with this, so many unknowns, right? We didn't know in the middle of March if we were going to be closed for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We don't find out till April 1st that schools are closed for the rest of the school year. Right. So we were jogging in place, very expensive thing to do. And we had to manage asking our customers to help support some basic expenses so that we don't go out of business. We keep our doors open and could be ready for potentially summer school. Then there wasn't going to be summer school. And now we have a little bit of summer school. About 25% of our school system will run this summer, and now we're getting ready for school. The transit, very interesting. The transit never stopped, as none of the transit systems did. I think maybe some of the interesting points for us is our ridership dropped, but not what the city saw. Long Island Railroad dropped to some less than 5% of ridership. Our ridership dropped to about 10% for the first week or two, and then actually started to rebound as soon as we started wearing masks. And we sit here today, we're almost at 50% of our ridership, which I think is higher than some of the other public systems. To me, that tells us that our system is small but very necessary. And the people that need our system actually do need it and use it.
That's actually an amazing number. I would have not thought you were at 50% yet.
Yeah, it's been the last couple of weeks. Of course, Long Island's opening and the city hasn't fully opened. We're staring at phase 4. You guys see, we're all driving cars. The population is, the roads are getting busier and what have you. I want to stop for a second. I almost forgot. I have a note here on my piece of paper. I got to do this publicly. I got to thank my transit division and Ray Grimaldi and my leadership team and the drivers, the mechanics. I mean, these people, unbelievable. The first 2 weeks of this pandemic, we don't have masks. No one has masks. We end up buying masks from a printer friend of mine, a guy I went to high school with, Anthony Spinelli. You mentioned his name too. Paying $3, by the way, not because he's just a middleman. $3 for a 30-cent mask, but we needed masks, so we got our driver's masks. And then the union stepped in and helped us as well. Debbie Hagan, our union president, did a great job working with us to try to figure out how to keep people safe. But we run the vehicles, and we really didn't know a lot, and we didn't have a lot of safety. A lot of people got sick. We lost one fellow, but most people just, the virus, let it take its course, quarantine. 500 people in the department, 50 people out, 10% of our population out in a quarantine in the first couple of weeks. Then those numbers started to tick down. As recent as last week, we had no quarantines, and now we've got a couple, but no one is sick with the virus. So the PPE, the mask, the distancing, we start right away. I think we were the first system to have people enter through the back of the bus, letting people pay fares electronically only. And we've developed different techniques, cleaning, distancing, limited number of people in the driver's room, wipe downs all day long, disinfecting at night, all these things. We built a shield for the driver to protect the driver with a plastic flexible shield that the DOT approved, just to help control the environment on the bus and keep the infection rate down. So it was a crazy experience. We got through it. We developed some really good techniques for keeping the workforce safe. And great effort on everyone's part. I went to the yard a couple of times in the morning, seeing drivers. No one refused work. These people were true first responders. They've been acknowledged by the governor a couple of times. Just woke up every morning and got their job done. So tremendous, and I want to thank them for that.
Really great to see people step up that way, John. Really, really tremendous. You know, it's easy to try and step up when things are good, but when things are bad, boy, that's when you see people's true colors. So that's great to hear.
So our school bus folks, now that school's over, are unemployed. Some districts paid us to pay the drivers throughout all this, and we thank them for that. That was tremendous. We speak to every school bus driver every single week, make sure they're all doing well. Folks, by and large, are anxious and ready to come back to work. We do worry a little bit about turnover. I think people that through all this have said to themselves, gee, I was going to retire in 2 or 3 years or 4 years, and maybe now I'm going to do it. You know, this has pushed them. This has been dramatic. New York has density. The virus hit us the worst at talking about it coming back. So we are worried a little bit about turnover. Motor vehicles has been closed, as you know, opened up a couple of weeks ago. But in standpoint of us staffing, it's created some challenges. We never stopped training. So when motor vehicles did open up, we had a bunch of people ready for a road test. But now we're looking at new applications, and to get a written test for the CDL takes a week or so. And we don't have the interest that we thought we were going to have. So very interesting that it's not going to be so easy to bring our staffing levels back up. But we're optimistic, and I think we'll get through this.
Hey, John, what did the school district say to you and your team about their plans for September? I would suspect that it's going to be a bit different. Many families might choose to drive their kids. I mean, if they can, some can't, obviously. So it's going to be, I assume, a very volatile situation.
Yeah, as a peek at the future, our summer program, we've got about 25% of the children we would normally transport for summer special needs have asked for transportation. So yeah, people potentially driving, but the school districts are telling us that folks just choosing to leave their children home, keep them at home. So that's where we're at right now. A couple of states around us have come up with plans, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, and they're talking about pretty normal stuff, by the way. 6 feet with a mask is impossible. They're looking at 3 feet or maximizing distance. Those are the words they're using. For us, we've got to be able to run a system that looks pretty normal, because we just don't have the equipment or the drivers to do every other seat, this type of thing. You know, we're looking at school year adult loading, which is like 2 to a seat instead of 3 to a seat on a school bus. It's a short ride. Driver wears a mask. Children will wear a mask. We crack the windows to keep airflow. We're disinfecting. We're cleaning. It's a relatively short trip to school. So Suffolk County Health Department talks about how this virus spreads, and it doesn't spread in a minute. You need several minutes next to someone that's infected. And I think I might have heard here or before this, I was on a Zoom, by the way, for school buses right before this, that children don't spread this disease as adults do. It doesn't get into their lungs. This is what we hear. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but our hope is that not only for a business, but as a parent, that school does return to relatively normal transportation. For the summer, we're loading 1 to a seat on a minivan. So this is all left to be determined. The governor set up a committee to study school opening. There were 4-hour meetings. Those ended last week, the last one. The committee had 200 people on it, and they're going to draw some conclusions, but I think one conclusion that comes out of this is one size does not fit all, and the plans are going to have to be flexible. So for us, that presents challenges. We got to build a set of runs for September. We've told our districts July 27th is pencils down, and let's have a plan in place and be able to start to react to that plan, knowing full well that we could get to September and maybe school doesn't open the first week, maybe it's the second week, maybe it's the third week, and we may open and have to change what we've already set up. So we got to be flexible. The benefit here is, besides having good people, we've got good technology. That's the industry, by the way, not just my company, where we've got routing algorithms and GPS systems and different ways to make adjustments. But it's going to be bumpy, awkward. People are going to have to be patient. And one of the things about being patient on is with arrival times. So we're going to try to get the most out of our fleet and be as efficient as possible by spreading children. Maybe buses are going to run on a little different schedule. Not every bus shows up exactly at 10 minutes before class starts. It might be right at class start. It might be 5-10 minutes later, just to get through this, hoping that we're not too far away from vaccines and normal transportation.
Yeah, John, to me, getting the schools open and getting your school bus system working well is, until we're there, we're not going to see massive economic rise, particularly here on Long Island. I mean, everybody I talk to has so much uncertainty about what's going to go on in the fall with schools that they're not even sure what their workload can look like. What are you doing with drivers? So I have to assume it's going to be a highly charged environment when you start doing those pickups with masks and safety and everything else. Is there any training or any sort of protocols you're going to have in place to be dealing with parents that are, that are upset about this or have issues? Because that's going to be a whole new thing for drivers to have to manage as well, right?
Yeah, one of the questions in this morning's Zoom is, how do you manage a child that that doesn't want to wear a mask? Should the bus driver be handing out masks? We said no to that. A parent shouldn't want us to hand their child a mask. What I've seen over the last couple of months, and we saw this with the transit, you got to have some hope and belief in humanity. Children are much better behaved on the school bus these days because of the iPhones. It's a short trip. I think my expectation is that we're going to communicate. There'll be brochures and pamphlets we'll hand out to parents. The drivers will be trained when they come back in August on how to manage these difficult situations. Sure, there's going to be some exceptions, but I think everyone's going to need to wear a mask, and everyone's going to understand they got to have a mask on, and they got to sit quietly. I mean, the school buildings, they're going to see how they're going to have to walk in one direction down certain hallways, and they're going to have to keep themselves apart in the classroom. We've got our challenges because we're on a bus and we're only one employee, but I'm optimistic that it's going to go better than we all think.
Some of the benefits.
Have the insurance companies, sorry, Peter, you had a question there, but I was curious. I got this rebate check from my auto insurance company because my car has been grounded for months. Have the insurance companies chipped in on transportation companies at all, particularly the school bus side?
Yeah, we were, as soon as the pandemic started, we reached out for those people, and they allowed us to keep the plates on the bus, and they gave us a 75% credit that we pass along to our customers. So yeah, that really worked out, I guess, as well as could be expected. And, you know, again, this is part of jogging in place. There's still an expense. So that's still some real money that we have to spend. If we knew we were going to shut down for 3 months completely, you know, 2 months ago, it might have made sense to pull the plates, but it is what it is. And we made the best of the situation.
So is the expectation that September you're going to be back? Is that what you're operating under right now?
Yeah, and that's the conversation that school's going to open. There is some concern that it opens right after Labor Day. Some districts are saying it might need another week or so to set the buildings up. The plans are not done yet, right? So the state has not come out with their guidance yet. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut have come out with the guidance. New York State has not come out with guidance. So we're expecting guidance next week. And then once the guidance is received, then the districts will prepare plans. We'll be part of that plan. And the state is looking for the opportunity to review those plans. I don't know how they're going to review 700 plans in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever time they have, but this is what we're being told. Hopefully by early August, late July, early August, these plans are in place, and then we're putting a school opening system together.
Yeah,
I was gonna say that that one of the good takeaways, you know, quote unquote, is that these kids and adults as well are learning a lot better about the importance of keeping, you know, their hands clean, and we're going to see a much less severe, hopefully, regular flu season as consequence of this once we get out of the COVID world. Hopefully there's no massive relapse in the fall. But John, I wanted to also ask you another question. I've heard, and again, I'm not so sure this is 100% accurate, but is it true that the New York City Mass Transit were considering UV lights in the ceilings of their buses and trains to kill any airborne potential viruses? Is that urban legend?
They're testing a system. You know, there was, when MRSA first came out, and this is years ago, someone was selling a ultraviolet product for school buses. And they were going to go to the school districts and convince everyone you need this to protect your riders. I picked up the phone, you know, that must be 15 years ago. I picked up the phone, I called the CDC directly, and they're like, this is not the best way to kill a virus.
Yeah.
Better off cleaning and disinfecting. So there's all sorts of products, and we got to be careful. Everything's expensive. The temperature scans, you know, so that there's another company that's approached us about something that's going to check every passenger with ultraviolet temperature before they get on the bus. However, we now know that the virus is very contagious 2 days before symptoms. Some people never get symptoms, but they are contagious. They can spread the disease. You could take 2 Tylenol and get rid of your fever. Maybe you're unbeknowing that you're hot because you were in the car for an extra time, or you ran for the bus, or what have you. So this all has to be figured out. I think our plan here, the best way to keep everyone safe is ventilation, masks, and as much distance as possible. And I think those 3 things together are going to prove, and it has proven to us. You know, we see our system now, our transit system, how it's running, and illness is very low. I think that's going to be very effective.
Yeah, great. So first of all, great news that that at least for now we're on track to get schools open in September. I think that's a sigh of relief for many people, and something we can look forward to. So John, from a transportation industry perspective, though, I mean, so I'm looking at it and I'm saying, how do you even gauge capacity at this point? So if you're going to have diminished capacity per bus, right? Does that mean you need more buses? Does that mean you're going to need less buses? Does that mean more people are going to be driving and walking? I mean, how are you gauging this? How are you looking at this from a macro perspective?
Are you talking about school buses now, Joe?
Yeah, school buses.
Yeah, so we're going to have a seating capacity. It looks very much, I'll call it adult seating capacity. So in a large school bus, the seats are 3 to a seat, 17 inches for children. High school children, we would only load them at adult capacity anyway. But all will have to be loaded now at adult capacity. So there'll be the seat in the middle will be empty. You can't do 1 to a seat. There's just the resources do not exist. Even a split shift would create challenges with that. So we're going to have to get to a point where we feel comfortable that the mask, the ventilation, and the cleaning programs are sufficient to allow children to sit two to a seat. Now, do more parents drive their children because they're worried? I don't know. More children are going to walk? Probably not. Walking is dangerous if you're a certain distance from the school. Driving might be the case. I think people will be ready for that, to allow that to happen. And, the summer is going to be a test. We got a little bit of a test with the summer school, but we're already seeing that people with masks on, the virus does not spread.
I agree with that. Masks are a critical first line of defense, and it's probably going to be with us for a long time to come.
Yeah, and I think we can all feel that, those of us that I feel had this virus, by the way, back in February, and have been tested. I don't have antibodies, but we all, if you're not sick, you feel really healthy. That's what I've been hearing from people. But I think we're all getting adjusted to this. I do find that people are respecting the mask. I go to the stores myself. I see people with the mask. I have a couple of friends that work in the city. Their companies are forcing them to drive in, but when they leave the garage and they walk to work and they're in the common spaces and the elevators, everyone's got a mask on. And I've heard some of the politicals on TV complaining that people aren't wearing masks. Everyone I see and people that I talk to are wearing masks. The young kids, maybe there's a chance that they don't. I went to the beach. I saw groups of young children walking around in town at Fire Island without the mask on. But by and large, stores, certainly on the bus, we haven't had a compliance problem, even on the public transit.
Yeah, it's good to see. And even in these states where they're now surging in cases, it's a disproportionate amount of young people that are testing positive, and it's because they all flooded the beaches, the bars, without masks, right? And it just became a problem. So, John, public transportation, one of the big questions I have in my mind, because to recover, Long Island to a certain extent is tied to New York City and vice versa. I'm not smart enough to know how the Long Island Railroad or the MTA survives this. I just don't, without massive taxes to subsidize them, and I just don't know how that impacts anything else. But what are you seeing in the world of public transportation and the MTA right now?
Well, money's a problem for everyone. It seems like forever, by the way, Joe. It's I can't remember. I'm working here on Long Island in this family business for 35 years. I'm not sure I ever remember a year where government said, we're okay, we got plenty of money. So yeah, the MTA lost 3 months worth of fare revenue, and that's dramatic. But if you spread that over a 10-year period, this will all be washed away. They're going to have to borrow and potentially raise fares. I think it's an opportunity to be smart. And I know Pat Foy, who's a tremendous leader. I know Pat personally, great chairman for the MTA. He's thinking of how to potentially reinvent the system, become a little more efficient. They move a lot of people, so it makes it complicated. And for us out here, this will create some opportunities. We've been looking at different ways to move people in Suffolk County. We've got plenty of need. We've got transit-friendly developments going on up all over the place. Tritech doing big developments in Yaphank, and there's development in Babylon. There's a big one here in Bayshore being proposed, Patchogue, and so on. So I think this system can fit right into all of that. Technology is going to be the answer. And the buzzwords are moving from fixed routes to flexible routes, and more demand service, shared ride using technology. We have a very big county. We're the most populated suburb in New York State, in Suffolk County, almost 1.4 million people, a lot of space, but we're surrounded by water, and we've got Upton, this piece of property in the middle of the county that divides our population. So there's some real geographic challenges, but I think we can meet those challenges. And technology, there's a way to grow this system. We do 6 million trips a year, so it's not nothing, with 150 transit buses and 200 paratransit vehicles. So we move a lot of people, but we can do it potentially with some technology and move more people for less money. And I know you guys have a little app, and maybe this is time to show a little video on a piece of technology that we already own, we're already using. It's called Transloc. This is an app for the phone. And with this app, you can determine where the bus is. Okay, so you won't have to wait any longer than you need to for a bus anymore, which is nice because we don't have a lot of bus stops in this county. But the other thing the app does is it anonymously tracks where people live, the bus stops they use, where they go with the bus, and where they go after the bus. And it's all done with heat maps. And green is on a trip going, and red's a trip coming home. And we can now see digitally every single day, and it accumulates over time. We can do it by time of the day as well, how our system's being used. So we're going to use this data, it's only 2 years old, to start to change how we put our fixed route system out and hopefully move towards ride sharing, demand type apps. So maybe we don't need as much fixed service after 7 o'clock at night when ridership is very low. We don't have a lot of stops, shelters. So it's not maybe as safe for some people to wait for the bus, but maybe they'll go to the nearest curb with an app that tells them when the vehicle's coming and they'll ride share. And maybe they'd be willing to pay a little more for that.
Yep, optimization is key. So let's run the video. It's about 2-minute video. Let's see this.
No question, the world of public transportation is changing at lightning speed. Beyond fixed routes and schedules, riders want more convenience and greater flexibility getting from point A to point B. And the numbers prove it. How do transit agencies live in a world filled with Uber and Lyft? You want to deliver the best possible experience for your riders. But big changes mean big risks, right? Introducing Transloc, the most flexible agency-owned microtransit solution that puts public agencies in the driver's seat. Whether it's solving for first mile, last mile, coverage versus frequency, off-peak transportation, or generally just serving more riders, data is crucial to knowing where to start. That's why we've designed a complete 3-step approach. Step 1 is simulation. Using big data and predictive modeling, we simulate your most successful options without ever having a single vehicle leave your parking lot. Step 2 is piloting your custom simulations to mitigate any risky ventures. Our microtransit experts work closely with you to ensure your success from day one. And step 3 is deploying our cloud-based flexible demand response system. More flexibility means better efficiency and a better rider experience, significantly reducing ride time and rider wait time while increasing riders by more than 50% at the same operating cost. It's as simple as 1, 2, 3. Let Transloc help your agency remain central to the future of modern transportation. Transloc. Deliver the ultimate rider experience. Talk to our microtransit experts today.
That's pretty cool.
That's great, John. And you know what? I'm somebody, I hate to drive. I hate it. I detest it. I deplore it. And to me, it's the biggest shortfall we have here on Long Island. If we had a robust transportation system, public transportation system, I wouldn't even own a car, right? So I see that, but this concept of first mile, last mile is the piece that really kills me. You know, we struggle with this even at the HIA in the industrial park, right? It's that first mile, last mile that gets you. So talk about that a little bit and the context of this technology, which I think is terrific. Optimizing wait time, I think, is critical, but that first mile, last mile is still a big challenge here, right?
Absolutely. And we're a suburb. We have a pretty comprehensive system that already exists. So our fixed route, these are the bigger buses, the 35-foot buses, come within 1.5 miles of 95% of this population. But 1.5 miles is a long way to walk. You know, I don't know, I can't, to be honest with you, I haven't walked 1.5 miles in a while myself. It would take you a fair bit of time. So the plan here with Transloc is right now we move 100% of our people with a fixed route system, putting the paratransit aside. Maybe we're going to move 50% of our people with a fixed route system, but it's only 25% of our equipment. And the other 75% are going to be smaller units. They're going to be able to more comfortably go down streets, meet people at common meeting areas, or go right to the curb of your house. And depending on how much you're willing to pay for a fare. So, you know, the fare goes from $2.25 to maybe $3.25 in a group area to possibly $5 if we're going right in front of your house. It's all publicly supported service. And it doesn't eliminate Uber, by the way. We consider Uber still to be a partner because Uber and Lyft show us that we don't have to own cars. Ultimately, Joe, and we went down to visit these folks at Transloc, really smart organization. They're owned by Ford Motor Company. They're building their business. They started on college campuses. Now they're in a lot of smaller urban areas in the middle of the country. They're not in New York City. They're probably not a New York City product, but they're perfect for us. They're building algorithms and they're buying up mapping companies and routing companies that are helping them build a really sophisticated routing system that ultimately the passenger will build the routes every day. It'll all be done electronically. This is not next year, but this is hopefully less than 5 years from now. And you'll have the app and you'll go online and you'll tell the system what your needs are for tomorrow, for the next day, or for a week from now. And then the system will build a set of routes that will best serve the population. And it's really, really cool stuff. That's how you move more people spending less money.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely
Really
brilliant. What sort of risks? So one of the things that has really come out, and so the video conferencing industry for 25 years has tried to make an impact in commerce. And the one thing that an industry that COVID really helped move along is this, Zoom, video conferencing, right? The realization that people don't need to leave their homes for everything, don't need to meet face-to-face for everything, and every job doesn't need to be commuted to. So what sort of challenge or risk from a public transportation system do you see Zoom and this work from home, having on that industry-wide?
Yeah, well, here in Suffolk County, I think we saw from the pandemic, many of our riders are essential workers. So I'm not so sure Zoom's going to have a big impact. Right. But we've done studies on our system. About a third of our system is for work, a third is for school, and a third is for social purposes, shopping, and what have you. And I think there's some great opportunities. I think there's untapped riders. My children are now in their early 20s, and I see their friends. By the way, they don't want to drive. I had one of my 3 children wanted a car. The other 2 didn't necessarily need a car. And they would take every opportunity to do something besides driving themselves, especially at night, which is really kind of a cool thing. So I think younger people here on Long Island, we're going to attract them with apartments and the 60,000 units that are being built on Long Island. They're going to want to have a public transit option. And if it's being done smartly with the app and it's convenient and it's cost effective, I think it's going to be a home run.
We had that in Huntington Village area. They have a, sort of like a little trolley-like van.
Yep.
Around.
Really smart.
Yeah.
Really smart. That came down to Bayshore. It didn't last very long. It was here last year. I know it's in Patchogue as well. Those are a couple of smart guys that have put that together. The same folks that do Midnight Chauffeur, and I use them from time to time. So all these options will come into play. They're all app driven. We've already built, by the way, a microtransit system for the town of Islip, and it's been piloted and we're ready to go. Our county executive, by the way, has been very supportive of all this, and his DPW people have been very supportive. So we're all anxious to get started. We got to get through this. It's not the perfect time, but as soon as things start to quiet down from the pandemic, we're ready to go. And I think everyone's going to be impressed with what's out there for us.
That's actually great opportunity, especially with MacArthur Airport in the town of Islip. I mean, I was talking with Angie Carpenter, and they had record numbers coming out of Islip MacArthur Airport pre-COVID, and then of course things just shut down. But I think if we can even make it easier for folks in the town of Islip, and especially to get to the airport, that's going to be a huge economic boom. For us. Just have to see what South Florida is gonna look like. John, question I have though is, I have always wondered over the last 20 years why the bus system here in Suffolk County has never really quite taken off. Right? It seems like a perfect fit. If I could catch a bus to work, I would every day. Why is it? How does this pandemic help move whatever that lag has been along, or has it hurt it?
Yeah, it's been again, it's the system that could. We moved 6 million trips with not a lot of vehicles. It's not user friendly. We only have Translo for 2 years, and probably took us 6 months to get people using it. So without bus shelters and without bus signs, without a lot of technology, who even knew where the bus was? So the people that used the system were folks that were trained by friends and family how to use the system. Now we have Transloc, so we're seeing a slight uptick in riders because people can now see when the bus is coming and so on. But this is a suburb, and people moved here, Joe, as you know, from the boroughs to have a house and a car and a garage. So there's 1.3 and change million people living here. Our constituency for the ridership on the transit system is probably somewhere around 40,000, a relatively small part. But we're looking to change that, and technology is going to help us change it. So the big bus, hopefully, is going to be only on certain streets. It's not very friendly to the neighborhoods, and we're going to use smaller, high-tech looking units, like the Transit Connect type unit with the slanted nose, possibly with a different color scheme. And this unit's going to take you a little closer, pick you up a little closer to your home, take you a little closer to where you're going, and you're not going to need a car. It's not going to be everyone. And this is going to be a suburb forever, and we're going to have cars and garages forever. But can we move 7 million people with the same or less dollars? That would be a home run. In the next 2 to 5 years.
And John, are you seeing anything? Are you hearing anything? I know it's been pretty big on Wall Street in the last couple of weeks. Hydrogen powered buses. Is that something that we've been hearing about?
Good friend of mine is involved with hydrogen. This is complicated. Again, I'm not a scientist. Yeah, hydrogen. So electric, utopia here is to have an electric motor that's powered with hydrogen. But hydrogen is very expensive to make and very difficult to store. So there are new companies and new technologies popping up. Elon Musk said we're not ready for hydrogen. But the concept of turning water into energy is unbelievable.
No.
And there are people that are doing it. The question is, can this be done practically? So I think we set ourselves back a little bit with this pandemic and government funding. We have a grant we have 4 all-electric school buses. We have a grant to buy 10 more all-electric school buses. By the way, beautiful pieces of equipment, run very nice, very efficient. But
who makes those, John?
Bluebird. Those are Bluebird all-electric buses, school buses. They have a very expensive battery on them. So it's a $300,000 bus. It's got $100,000 worth of batteries. So a conventional diesel bus is about $100,000. So the battery is now the cost of the bus, a conventional bus. So we need to manage this. If we can get the cost of the battery down so the battery is smaller. Electric motors have been around forever. They're cost efficient. They're fuel efficient. And if we can get the battery and the motor energy without having to use a whole bunch of lithium, that would be a great thing to do. With a transit system, it may be more effective to charge in multiple locations. Personally, I feel we're going to see electricity in the roads, and it'll start with buses, and you'll see them like the old trolleys. That was actually a pretty good idea, and those vehicles were efficient, and they're easy to maintain, and they're cost effective. Maybe we're going to see it in the road. We can now pass electricity without actually laying wire on top of wire. So maybe it's something that's going to, electricity in the road and the bus hovers over it, and it continues that way.
So John, last few minutes, what do you see? So what do you see the next 3, 6 months? When do you see things really starting to open up? What are the key things you're looking at so that you can tell and gauge when you should start really anticipating things are going to be opening up and deploying some more capital? How are you gauging it all?
Well, the ridership on a transit system, very small little part of our world and our society here in Suffolk County, but it does speak to how quickly things could potentially come back. We're at 40%. We had 1 week we went up 10%. So I expect that we're going to be somewhere around 50, 60% by the time we get to August. Now, I don't think we get to 100% by September. We've done some modeling. We have to model for paratransit because we've got to see if we're bringing drivers back from layoff. I think we're looking at, we don't see 100% until we have vaccine. So, maybe we're at 60, 70% as we get into the fall. I think parents are anxious to get their children back in school. Schooling is important. We can't afford to let our children take another semester or half a semester in front of the TV set or in the kitchen. It doesn't work. So I expect that people are anxious for school. School will open in September, and we'll have most. There will be people that don't send their children to school, for sure. That's going to be the case. But I think it's going to be a very small number of people. So I see complicated normal, not new normal, complicated normal, September, October. And, I'm not a doctor, but I think a lot of this virus has run its course here in New York. A lot of us have been exposed to it. I'm not saying we've all been sick, we've all the antibodies, but we saw from the protest, we didn't see that bump that we were expecting from the protest. So if all goes well, and we're going to be optimistic about it, maybe we don't get the big bump that they're talking about. I could see potentially a small bump. Maybe we got to reset, and we're looking at late fall, early winter, and we got to shut down schools for 2 weeks and then bring them back just to let people reset themselves. But hey, I live in Bayshore. I got a lot of friends that are doctors. They tell me what you're hearing on TV. We've learned how to manage this illness. The hospitals have availability. We now know how to use the ventilator when we're using steroids. And the vulnerable population, my parents and my in-laws, they got to be ultra careful, and they got to stay home, and they got to not maybe pass on church even, or let people shop for them in the stores. And that's how we're going to get through this. 45% of the people in the country that fell ill and died were elderly folks coming from nursing homes. So we know where the vulnerable people are, and the rest of us are just going to have to manage it. And the mask is the key. We need better masks, by the way. Can someone on this Zoom give us the ultimate mask? We need better masks.
I might have a good guest for that in the future, Joe. Hey, John, a low cost, not a fancy technology idea, but maybe something you want to look at. Just simple PSAs on buses, and maybe through the loudspeaker reminding kids to wear the mask. Keep your hands off of people, that kind of thing. These kids are going to learn that. It's like mind the gap. Now we all know it. These
right.
type of things happen over time, and it gets into our brains, and it affects behaviors.
Right. Yeah, so it's training of the drivers. We've got signage plans for the fall for our vehicles and for our yards. And we're talking about putting out, we've done a few small commercials. We did a commercial to thank our transit drivers. Now we're talking about doing a commercial to get everyone ready for school opening and writing our system with a mask. So that's a good idea, and communication is going to go a long way.
Yeah, it's going to have to get the PTAs on board. I mean, I don't envy you guys those months of transition. It's going to be testy. What people don't realize, and what I'm certainly really proud of, John, I mentioned this to you early on in this, is, we were the pioneers. Long Island, New York, we were all the pioneers in this COVID here in the United States. And boy, did we take it on the chin with no information, no data, no knowledge, no hospital infrastructure, no ventilators. And as we see these other states that are starting to have a surge now, they have all of that knowledge, right, that they were able to gain from us. If you remember, CDC said, don't wear masks. Now it's wear a mask. Now they have ventilators. And it's really been incredible leaders like you, John, that have helped get us through this and have helped give us comfort, knowing that someone like you is running a company that's going to be transporting our kids. Your commitment to safety, I've known you a long time, and I know your industry really well. Your commitment to safety is impeccable, and I'm sure you're going to do a terrific, terrific job. So what I like to do when we close out the show is everybody gets a final comment, and it has to be positive. Right? It has to be positive. So John, I'll give you the last comment that has to be positive, because we like to end on a positive note here.
Everything's moving in the right direction. We're ready, we're safe, we're clean. And this is going to be complicated, but it will not be unsafe. And I look forward to getting back to work on a full schedule.
Yep. PK?
Sure. So as we move into our birthday weekend for our country and we celebrate independence, we are excited about being independently minded, but also together as a country, and we have to make sure that we take care of everybody. So, be mindful of the others around you.
Yeah, I agree with that. My final comment is, boy, oh boy, do I love going to a restaurant now and getting somebody else to make a martini for me and really enjoying somebody else's food. I'll tell you, it was rough. It's great to get out there, and for the most part, these restaurants are doing a great job. And I would encourage everybody, please, to support the local restaurants as much as you can. We need them. We need them alive and vibrant here on Long Island. So, John, I want to thank you for taking an hour out with us. This has been incredibly important. You answered so many questions that I had, and I know so many people out there had. Like I said, this is going to be archived, and you're going to see people looking at it, and I'm sure reaching out to you with questions. For folks coming up again in the future, as I mentioned, next week we have Mike Paff from the Long Island Ducks, and we're going to be talking about professional sports and the Ducks here, specifically on Long Island. And we're going to have Bill Borges with him, the owner of Long Island Gymnastics, because gymnastics school and summer camps are going to be a huge part of this summer for folks, and we're going to get an update on that. July 14th, we're going to have Congressman Lee Zeldin talking about federal response and how that's all working out. And then July 21st, we're going to have Alan Inkles and Bill Biddle, the Stoller Center and the Tillis Center, talking about performing arts and what the future of that is. So great stuff coming on. John, thanks again, man. Thanks for doing such a great job and for taking time out. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Have a great one. Thanks.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.